Imagine millions of commuters driving along Interstate 15 every single day, listening to music and drinking coffee while heading toward the bright neon lights and endless excitement of Las Vegas. Most of these travelers never bother to look down at the ground beneath their tires, completely unaware that their entire world depends on a narrow 3-mile gap in the rugged mountains. California currently stands as the fifth largest economy on the entire planet. Yet this massive global prosperity is surprisingly dangling by a very thin thread over the treacherous Cajon Pass Canyon. Every single year, goods worth over $200 billion flow through this specific mountain corridor, carrying everything from essential medical supplies to the latest high-tech gadgets for American consumers. If this vital artery were to suddenly collapse today, the shelves at massive retailers like Amazon, Walmart, and Target across the nation would become completely empty in less than 72 hours. Although Southern California appears to be part of the mainland, its infrastructure actually functions like a fragile island that is tied to the rest of the country by one single knot. Deep beneath the concrete and steel of this massive transportation hub, a metaphorical time bomb is silently counting down toward an inevitable disaster that could change the face of America forever. Most people think of infrastructure as permanent monuments of human achievement, but at Cajon Pass, we are staring at a structural noose tightened around the very neck of the Golden State. We have built our modern lives on the assumption of stability, ignoring the fact that our entire supply chain relies on a geological crack that is waiting for the perfect moment. This is the terrifying story of why a few miles of mountain road represent the single most dangerous point of failure for the economy of the entire United States of America. Before this video ends, you will understand why the ground you drive on is not just dirt and rock, but a ticking fuse connected to a global financial explosion waiting to happen. Welcome to the analysis of the Cajon Pass, the silent guardian of our prosperity and the potential architect of our most devastating economic collapse in modern history as we know it. Back in the 1950s, California engineers looked at the Cajon Pass and saw a golden opportunity to squeeze all vital infrastructure into one single, narrow mountain corridor for maximum efficiency. Today, this pass is a masterpiece of engineering, featuring 60,000 vehicles that traverse its steep surface daily, representing the lifeblood of the entire southwestern region of the United States. Hidden silently beneath the layers of asphalt and dirt are massive transcontinental fiber optic cables that provide lightning-fast internet connectivity to millions of businesses across the vast American landscape. Two massive high-pressure gas pipelines, with diameters ranging from 24 to 36 inches, are buried deep in the ground, pumping essential energy to fuel the homes of Southern California. Towering high above the traffic are 3 sets of 500 kilovolt transmission lines, carrying enough electricity to power entire cities and sustain the complex modern lifestyle of 20 million people. Looking at this concentration of power and data, it is easy to feel a sense of pride in our ability to conquer nature and build such a sophisticated and organized network. However, an anonymous engineer from the California Department of Transportation once described the Cajon Pass as both a brilliant technical masterpiece and a terrifying engineering nightmare at the very same time. This duality exists because everything we have built depends on the assumption that the earth beneath us will remain motionless and stable, despite the violent history of the San Andreas Fault. We admire the towering pylons and the smooth roads while forgetting that they are literally sitting on top of two massive tectonic plates that are grinding against each other every second. The pressure is building up silently in the dark crust below, storing massive amounts of energy that will eventually seek a way to escape through the path of least resistance. We have essentially packed every single critical utility into a narrow throat of rock, making it an incredibly efficient target for the massive geological forces that rule our planet without mercy. By concentrating all our strength in one place, we have inadvertently created a single point of failure that could dismantle our modern civilization in the blink of a very short eye. Our impressive concrete structures are nothing more than fragile toys when compared to the raw power of a shifting continent that is preparing to move several meters in a heartbeat. The illusion of safety is thick and comforting, but the reality is that we are standing on the very edge of a crater that is ready to erupt at any moment. As we look closer at the design of these systems, we begin to realize that the genius of our ancestors might have accidentally built the perfect trap for our current generation. Most people envision a massive earthquake as a violent vertical shaking that makes the ground bounce up and down like a stormy sea during a very powerful and dangerous hurricane. However, the specific geological reality at the Cajon Pass is far more terrifying because the Earth here does not just shake, it moves in a sudden and massive horizontal direction. To truly understand what will happen, imagine standing on a giant sheet of paper that is suddenly torn in half by two invisible hands, pulling in opposite and violent ways. This is the precise mechanics of the San Andreas Fault, where two massive tectonic plates are currently locked together, building up centuries of intense and deadly subterranean pressure and energy. According to the scientific models from the Geological Survey, a major rupture along this segment is predicted to result in a sudden horizontal displacement of exactly 30 feet in seconds. To put that into a visual perspective, 9 meters is roughly the height of a 3-story building, but instead of height, the Earth moves that entire distance sideways almost instantly. Now imagine a giant building moving sideways underneath all the critical infrastructure we discussed earlier, including the high-pressure gas lines and the vital fiber optic cables buried in soil. Modern high-pressure gas pipelines are made of incredibly strong steel, but they possess a very specific elastic limit and cannot survive being stretched or twisted by 9 meters of movement. When these pipes inevitably reach their breaking point, they will not simply leak. They will explode with a force equivalent to a series of massive and devastating tactical military bombs. High-pressure methane gas escaping from the ruptured steel will quickly ignite when it meets the inevitable sparks from the snapping 500 kilovolt transmission lines overhead during the collapse. This creates a terrifying corridor of fire that will stretch for miles along the pass, melting asphalt and destroying everything in its path within the first 60 seconds of the quake. As the massive electrical pylons begin to fall, they will trigger a devastating domino effect that could potentially destabilize the entire Western Interconnection power grid, serving the entire Western region. This complex network, known as the WECC, is highly sensitive to sudden changes in voltage, and the loss of the Cajon Pass lines could plunge several states into total darkness. We often assume that an earthquake is a localized disaster, but at the Cajon Pass, it becomes a systemic failure that weaponizes our own infrastructure against the very people it serves. The steel that was meant to transport energy and the cables meant to carry information will become the very instruments of destruction during those first few minutes of the event. California will not struggle because of the shaking Earth itself, but because of what happens in the 60 seconds after the fault line moves 9 meters in a single horizontal slide. This fatal flaw in our design was known for decades, yet we continued to build and expand, hoping that the statistics would remain in our favor for just a little longer. The reality of a 30-foot horizontal shift is not a matter of if. It is a mathematical certainty that is carved into the very stone of the San Andreas Fault. Every second that passes without a rupture is just another second of accumulated energy being stored for the most violent geological release Southern California has ever seen in modern history. This is the fatal flaw of the Cajon Pass, a technological masterpiece built directly on top of a geological nightmare that is now preparing to wake up and take its revenge. We are now entering a new era where our reliance on a single narrow corridor will be tested by the raw and unforgiving power of the shifting North American and Pacific plates. But what happens to the 20 million people who are living inside when all of those vital systems suddenly collapse into a massive heap of twisted steel and burning fire? Within the very first minutes of the disaster, massive landslides triggered by the earthquake will completely bury the Interstate 15 and sever the critical railway lines through the pass. The rupture of major petroleum pipelines will immediately cut off 50% of the total energy and fuel supply that Southern California relies on for its massive daily operations. After only 24 hours have passed, local gas stations will begin to run completely dry, leaving ambulance crews and fire departments without the fuel they need to save lives. Hospital emergency backup generators will also begin their terrifying countdown as they consume their remaining fuel reserves, while the power grid remains dark and silent across the entire region. By the 48-hour mark, the complex food distribution system will cease to function, causing grocery store shelves to become empty as people begin to panic for their survival. Even the essential California aqueduct, which provides life-giving water to millions, will stop flowing because it also crosses the dangerous fault line at this exact and vulnerable point. After 72 hours, 20 million people in the largest metropolitan area of the country will face a triple crisis of failing energy, disappearing food supplies, and water. This is not just a local tragedy because 40% of all goods imported into the United States enter through the massive ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. When the Cajon Pass is closed, hundreds of thousands of shipping containers will have nowhere to go, effectively paralyzing the supply chain for the entire North American continent. Every single day of this logistical nightmare will cost the United States economy billions of dollars, sending a massive shockwave through the global financial markets and international trade. Southern California is essentially an infrastructure island, and once the bridge at Cajon Pass is broken, the isolation will turn a natural disaster into a national logistics catastrophe. Millions of vehicles will be stranded on highways with nowhere to go, creating the largest traffic jam in human history, while the surrounding hills continue to burn from gas. The psychological impact on a population that has never experienced such a total loss of modern services will be just as devastating as the physical damage to the concrete. Communication will break down as cell towers lose power and the fiber optic backbone remains severed, leaving millions of families in a state of terrifying silence and total uncertainty. This is the moment when the illusion of our modern invincibility disappears, revealing the true fragility of a society that has optimized itself for efficiency but not survival. Without the ability to transport goods in or out, the region becomes a massive prison of concrete and steel, separated from the rest of the world by rocks. We are looking at a scenario where a single geographic bottleneck determines the fate of a global superpower and the millions of people who call this beautiful desert home. To understand the true scale of the looming danger, we must look back to the 1857 Fort Tejon earthquake, which remains the strongest recorded event in California history. Seismologists estimate that this massive historical event reached a magnitude of 8.0, tearing the earth for over 200 miles along the treacherous and unpredictable San Andreas fault line. In 1857, the shaking lasted for several minutes, causing the earth to open up and creating visible scars on the landscape that can still be seen from space today. Careful geological research of the ancient soil layers reveals that this specific section of the fault typically releases its stored energy in a cycle of roughly 150 years. As we stand here on this very day of April 9th, 2026, it has been exactly 167 years since that massive release of geological energy took place. We are currently living through a period that is 17 years overdue for a major earthquake, and the pressure continues to build silently in the deep darkness beneath our feet. We are currently carrying a massive amount of geological debt, a burden of energy that has been silently accumulating for over 60,000 days without any form of significant release. While you are watching this video, the massive Pacific Plate is slowly but surely grinding northward at a consistent speed of 50 millimeters every single year without stopping for anything. This movement might seem small, but over many decades, it creates an enormous amount of tension that can only be released through a violent and sudden shift of the landscape. Every single sunrise over the San Gabriel Mountains brings us closer to the moment when the tectonic tension exceeds the strength of the rocks, leading to an unstoppable chain reaction. Some scientists argue that these cycles are not perfectly regular, suggesting that we might have more time. But this uncertainty actually makes the situation much more dangerous for everyone involved. Not knowing exactly when the ground will snap does not mean the risk is gone. It simply means that we are currently gambling with the lives of millions of innocent people. For many decades, experts have warned about the extreme vulnerability of the Cajon Pass, yet no significant alternative infrastructure has been built to bypass this singular and dangerous bottleneck point. Building a second corridor would cost the government tens of billions of dollars, a price tag that many politicians find difficult to justify during their short 4-year terms in office. However, the projected cost of a total collapse is estimated to reach hundreds of billions of dollars, not counting the immeasurable loss of human life and the destruction of communities. We are essentially trapped in a system where short-term financial savings are prioritized over the long-term survival of the most important economic engine in the entire United States of America. The Cajon Pass remains a ticking fuse, and every day that passes without action is a day we are moving closer to a disaster that we fully understand and predicted. The question is no longer about whether this event will happen, but whether we will be a society that prepared or a society that watched its own shelves go empty. When the ground finally moves those 9 meters horizontally, our modern technology and clever designs will be tested by the ancient and raw laws of a shifting and unforgiving planet Earth. You can choose to ignore this warning as just another piece of internet content, or you can begin to ask why our most vital artery is protected by absolutely nothing. California is a land of dreams and innovation, but it is also a land of geological debt that is now reaching its final and most expensive collection date in history. Do you believe that the government is simply underestimating this massive risk, or is it possible that they already know the truth and are keeping quiet to avoid global panic? Share your thoughts in the comments below because your voice might be the only thing that forces a change before the clock finally reaches zero and the mountains begin to move. If you found this analysis important, please consider sharing it with others, as awareness is the first step toward demanding the resilient infrastructure that our modern world desperately needs. Thank you for watching this deep dive into the hidden thimble of California, and stay safe as we wait for the inevitable movement of the world beneath our very own feet.